Hey there, my name's Brashler, and in this video, I want to show you how to set up your Behringer WING Compact as a dedicated monitor engineering console for a monitor engineer to mix up to 27 mixes plus a cue. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do that with the Behringer WING Compact. Now, if you're brand new to my channel, I'm all about helping you feel more confident with your production gear no matter where you're starting from. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, I know I just said 27 monitor mixes. Well, if we look at our buses, there's really only 16. So how are we getting to that? Well, a most recent update on the Behringer Wing has allowed us to send our individual channels not only to the mix buses, but we can also send it to the main buses, and we can also send these individual channels to the matrices. So when we add up all of that, we have 16 mix buses, we have 4 main buses, and then we have 8 matrices. All of those can be mono or stereo. So we could do a 27 in-ear mix with stereo in-ears off of our channels that we have on the board. Now remember, you are limited to those 48 channels that we have, but that's a massive amount of channels and a massive amount of outputs for your band to have. Now I also mentioned that there was a cue mix. Now when I am mixing monitors, I am mixing in a post fader setup. And so the way that I mix monitors is that I listen to my main one pretty much all the time, unless there's a specific thing that I need to adjust for one of my musicians. And by listening to my main one, I create a mix that I want to hear. And that way, if I hear something that's off, maybe the tracks are too loud, or the acoustic guitar is too quiet, or the vocalist is way too loud, or the vocalist is way too quiet. Any of those things, I could then go and adjust on my mix, and that would be affecting all the rest of the musicians that are up on stage, leading to having their mixes be a trim off of mine. So I'm going to be listening to every single channel, including click, including cue, including all the talkbacks, and I'm going to create myself a nice mix. And I'm always listening to that on main one. And then all the rest of the mix buses, matrices, main buses, all set up as post fader. And that way, if I go and reach and adjust a channel, I'm going to be doing it for the entire band. Now, there's one exception that I make on this, is I will pre-fader all of the channels for the individual musician who's playing that channel. So for instance, my bass guitar, if I'm making a fader adjustment here, I'm not wanting it to adjust his mix because he is listening to his one instrument and how that relates to the rest of the band. And so if I make a fader adjustment on the bass guitar, I don't want it to affect that musician. So what I'll end up doing is by channel for that mix, I will go and pre-fader those channels into that musician's ears. So bass guitar, I'm doing it pre-fader for him, but post-fader for the rest of everyone in the mix. And then if I go to, say, acoustic guitar, same thing. Pre-fader to that person's mix, post-fader for the rest of it. So let me actually show you how to get the console set up for this specific thing. The next thing I'm going to do is go into my bus settings, and I'm going to make sure that this is stereo. If I need it to be mono, I can go ahead and mono it here. So say this was a wedge, then I could go ahead and mono that wedge. The next thing I'm going to do is go into my bus feed configuration and set it to be a post fader for all of the channels, and I'm going to set them to on and set them to negative infinity. And at this point, I'm going to press all channels, and this is going to affect all of these channels, and then I'm going to press apply. So now what it's done is it's changed every single channel to be post fader going into this mix bus. Now I'm going to then do this same thing for all the rest of the 16 mix buses. So I'm going to do that real fast. So now I've set up all my mix buses to have the channels being sent post fader, and they're currently all at negative infinity. The next thing I need to do is put all of these channels up at 0, so that way when I start adding in channels, I'll actually be able to hear it in those transmitters. And then the very last thing I need to do is, because the Behringer Wing, when you initialize the console, sets certain of the mix buses to feed the mains, for instance, I want to go through and make sure that none of these are going to the main bus. So here's my in-ear 1, and I'm going to select here. So this is where all my main sends are, and I'm just going to make sure that all of these are not being sent to the mains. So for instance, in-ear 9 is. So I'm going to turn that off, 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 and go through the rest of them to make sure that that is set. So here's my 9, 10, 11, and 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. All right, so now I have these 16 in-ears set up. Now let's go ahead and move over to the mains. Maybe I can use the mains as my wedges. So main 2 is going to be my wedge 1. And then we have wedge 2. And wedge 3. And then the matrices, I'm going to then fill in the rest of my in-ear mixes. Now, these wedges, before I go too far, are mono. So boom, boom, and boom. So those are mono there. So now let's go to the matrices, and we can name these. So there we now have those set. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these up to 0. And then I'm going to go through and set all of these to be post fader for the channels. So we can go post and on and set to infinity for all channels. So then with my main, I am going to title this as Q, because this is my mix. So what I've done is I have now set up my board for 24 in-ear mixes between the 16 mix buses and then my 8 matrices. And then I've also set up 3 dedicated mono sends for wedges. Now these are mono because the wedges are just, there's a single wedge in front of them. So it's just one channel. So I went ahead and make that a mono for this instance. But we could use this for 3 additional stereo in-ears if we wanted to, for instance. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is I am going to create my mix for my in-ears. And what I do is I set all of these to 0. And when I'm first initially setting up my channel gains from the stage with the head amp, I'm going to leave these all at 0. And then I'm going to adjust the amount of preamp gain to get it good sounding in my ears for the overall mix. I'll try and leave these all at 0 as much as I can. And that way, I have the ability of looking down and seeing if I've had to apply any gain or reduction for any of my channels. Now at this point, I've now created a mix just with them kind of fiddling around and checking their instruments, making sure that everything is sounding good. Now at this point, in my in-ears, I have click, I have talkbacks, I have the full band, but none of the band has their instruments quite yet. And so at this point, this is where I would set all of their in-ear mixes to be a trim off of my mix. Now for vocalists, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set all of the band inputs around -20 to -10, and then I'm going to put their vocal up at 0. And so for instance, my in-ear 1 is going to be for my vocalist 1. And so at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set all of these to about -20. And I'm going to just go through the band and set all of these to -20. Now when I get to vocal 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this up to 0 and then turn the rest of the vocals to -20. Now with this vocalist, I'm going to set this as pre-fader to this bus. So here is where I have my vocal 1, and I'm going to tap up in here and create this as a pre-fader tap. And so at this point, now I can go in and set my tap point of where I want this to be for this vocalist. And so if I had some really heavy compression, maybe I'll do it before the compression for this vocalist. That way they're getting the gate and the EQ and the good sound of that, but they're not getting the heavy compression for that vocalist, which is going to be smart. But then the rest of the band really wants that compression and everything like that for blending their in-ears with. So at this point, now I can go on to my in-ear 2 and set up this vocalist. So I'm going to go and set my vocal 2, and this is also going to be a pre-fader tap point. And then the rest of the band for this vocalist is going to be at this -20. And so we can see here's vocal 1, here's vocal 2, and then I can do this for the rest of the instruments. So say my in-ear 5 is my electric guitarist. So I'm going to set all of these to -20. Now I find with the band instruments, if they're not actually singing, they can get away with having this up at -10. Which will give them a little bit more volume on their pack, which means that they won't have to rock that volume as loud. But I find with guitarists and whatnot, having this bass at -10 and then their instrument at 0 is going to be a best like happy medium. But sometimes this is going to land anywhere between -20 and -10. So you can ask them ahead of time if they want to have more bass or more drums or different things like that in their in-ear mix before you even actually put anything through their ears. So as they're setting up, as they're loading in, go and chat with those musicians, and maybe your electric guitarist is like, actually, I don't want any overheads, so boom. And I really don't want the hi-hat or the toms. I just really want kick and snare. So we can do that. So here's the kick, here's the snare, there's no hi-hats, and there's no toms. Now again, this is post-fader off of my mix, and this is just a trim of what I am creating in my own in-ear. So I already know that this guitarist wants no overheads, no toms, no hi-hat. Okay, I've already built that for him. So let's go to his electric. I'll turn that up to 0, and then I'll put all the rest of these at -10, except the vocals. Usually he wants those a little bit quieter. So there we go. And now I need to remember for my electric guitar to set this to pre-fader. So we're going to move that to a tap point. And so now I have this in-ear mix already built for my guitarist. And so again, with this trim off of my mix, it makes it so that I really only have to listen to my mains. So I can go to my cue, and here is my mix that I'm listening to. And so if I find that there is something wrong with the tracks and they are too loud, what I can do is I can go find my tracks and I can turn this down, knowing that it's adjusting everyone's ears on that specific send. Now, another instance is the electric guitar. Maybe he goes into a patch and it's super loud. Well, I want that musician to know that, one, they've messed up and they have this very loud patch, but I don't want the rest of the band to be impacted by that. What I can now do is I can go to the electric channel, I can turn it down and create that nice mix in my ears. This is affecting all of the band except that electric guitarist. And so that electric guitarist knows that there is something wrong in his setup that he needs to then adjust. Once he adjusts it back, then we can bring it right back up to 0 where we were before. Now this is the beauty of this post-fader setup with this in-ear mix. Now we would then go through and do the rest of this setup for all of the rest of our 27 in-ear and monitor mixes. And then again, we just listen in on the Q wedge. And what's really nice about the Behringer Wing is that when we're mixing, all we have to do is really focus in on these 16 buttons right here. I can go to my buses, and here is my different mixes on my console. And then if I go back to my Q bus, boom, there we are. Here's my wedge 1, here's my wedge 2, wedge 3, and then my other in-ear mixes going all the way down to in-ear 24. So if I'm setting up a Behringer Wing for a monitor engineering setup, I am grabbing the Behringer WING Compact. 1, because it's nice and small, but 2, these sections right here is so fast for pulling up the Senzon fader for those individual channels. So this is one of my favorite consoles for actually mixing in-ears on for a monitor engineering setup if we wanted to be using the Behringer Wing. So the Behringer WING Compact is going to be the most ideal console for a monitor engineering setup. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you today. If you do happen to have any questions, or there's a video that you're hoping that I would make on monitor engineering, or really anything out there, please post that in the comment section down below, as I'm always reading through those comments to find videos that can be helpful for you. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.